Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying Volume 5, which is titled The First Stage of Enlightenment, Stream Enter. We're starting this new book today, and we're going to be exploring chapters 1 through chapters 10. So if you guys would like to volunteer to read, the way that we do this particular program is anybody in Zoom, you're welcome to volunteer to read by just electronically raising your hand. Then you can unmute your mic and be able to read a particular chapter. Then I'll share some teachings on that chapter. Then we'll open up to any and all questions that you guys have related to that particular chapter. If you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can ask questions by putting those into the comment section. I'll be able to see those. Or if you're in Zoom, you can also raise your hand electronically and ask any and all questions that you like. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly, and invite you to join along and study in the words of the Buddha. The teachings that we're sharing in this book series, it's available at no cost. You can go to our website, which is buddhadailywisdom.com, and from there you can actually download these books. And if you would like, you can actually get printed versions by taking it and go printing it, or you can order them on Amazon, or you can even get them at the temple here in Chiang Mai, because it's nice to read before and or after class, because you have the original words of the Buddha here, and you've got a reference that takes you back to the Pali Canon, and then you've got words from me that are helping you to be able to reflect on this and understand how to integrate it into your day-to-day life. So it looks like Pat has raised his hand for this first chapter. So Pat, if you'd like to read this first one, go ahead, sir.
The Mirror of the Stream Enterer. Ananda, I will teach you a teachings exposition called the Mirror of the Teachings, equipped with which a noble disciple, if he aspires, could by himself declare of himself. I am one finished with hell, finished with the animal realm, finished with the realm of afflicted spirits, finished with the plane of misery, the bad destinations, the netherworld. I am a stream enterer, no longer bound to the netherworld, fixed in density with enlightenment as my destination. And what, Ananda, is that teachings exposition? The mirror of the teachings, equipped with which a noble disciple, if he aspires, could by himself declare thus of himself. Here, Ananda, a noble disciple possesses confirmed confidence in the Buddha thus. The perfectly enlightened one is an arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, fortunate, knower of the worlds, unsurpassed leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of heavenly beings and humans, the enlightened one, the fortunate one. He possesses confirmed confidence in the teachings thus. The teachings are well expounded by the perfectly enlightened one, directly visible, immediate, having one to come and see, applicable, to be personally experienced by the wise. He possesses confirmed confidence in the community thus. The community of the perfectly enlightened one's disciples is practicing the wholesome way, practicing the straight way, practicing the true way, practicing the proper way. That is, the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 types of individuals. This community of the perfectly enlightened one's disciples is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of respectful salutation, the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. He possesses the virtues dear to the noble ones, unbroken, untorn, unblemished, unblotched, liberating, praised by the wise, not misunderstood, and leading to concentration. This, Ananda, is those teachings exposition, the mirror of the teachings equipped with which a noble disciple, if he aspires, could by himself declare of himself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So in this book, you're going to get a whole assortment of teachings that are helping to guide you to the first stage of enlightenment. you would have needed to develop your practice through volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4 in order to get to the point where now, studying volume 5, you'll be able to have some foundation to be able to understand what the Buddha is teaching you. There's multiple things that an individual needs to do and practice and train their mind to accomplish in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. But here in this first chapter, we're getting insight into one aspect of getting to the first stage of enlightenment, and that is the elimination of doubt. When you eliminate the fetter of doubt, among other things that you need to accomplish in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will have confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. And then the fetter of wrong behavior and observances, you will have developed a certain amount of moral conduct, because as long as you're putting out harm through your moral conduct, this harm is coming back to you. And by the time that you've gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, you've clearly seen the natural law of karma. You understand the natural law of karma in detail. So you would have cleaned up your moral conduct to a certain degree, because you know whenever you put out harmful decisions through your intention, speech, and actions, and then even your livelihood, that this is all just going to come back to you. So what the Buddha is starting you off here with saying is essentially that the stream enterer is no longer going to be reborn into the realm of hell, animal realm, or afflicted spirits. That's because in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, an individual would have developed into a better human being at that point. They're not functioning like an enlightened being would, but they're performing in their day-to-day life, in their doing things in a way that is much improved from where they were before. So this whole path to enlightenment is all about becoming a better and better human being. So by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you've developed to a certain degree. And if you die in that stage of enlightenment, then you're going to come back into the world as a human being. In this stage of enlightenment that we refer to as stream enterer, the first stage, the reason why it's referred to as stream enterer is because just like a log enters the stream, it will eventually get to the ocean. Once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment. It's just a matter of time, either in this life or some future life. With a maximum of 7 rebirths, you're going to be able to get to enlightenment itself. But you'll never be reborn down into the lower realms again. So this is a very important step in one's development on the path to enlightenment, is getting to that first stage of enlightenment. So now the Buddha goes into some detail about what an individual has accomplished in order to be able to get to this first stage of enlightenment. But it's not just these 4 things. Whenever you are learning the teachings of the Buddha, he will give a discourse and explain certain things, but then there's other discourses and other discourses and other discourses that are going to explain more to you about what it takes to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. These are just 4 aspects of one's practice. They will have confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and they will have developed their moral conduct to a certain degree. By the time you've gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, you've already put together the Eightfold Path really well, and you're already starting to experience the jhanas, and you have experienced them as you've made your way through them now into the first stage of enlightenment. And you've seen significant improvement to the condition of your mind. The mind isn't yet enlightened, but in that first stage of enlightenment, there's a significant decrease in the discontentedness that one's experiencing. It's a mere fraction of what it once was. And because of this, having experienced the jhanas and now moving into the first stage of enlightenment, you will have seen significant improvement, and you will have confidence in the Buddha. You will know that this individual lived and his teachings are actually real and true. You will have confidence in his teachings because you will have learned them to a certain degree, and you will have implemented them to a certain degree and noticed the benefits. And you will have confidence in the community that you're part of, because you will see that people in the community are also practicing the teachings well, and it's helping you to be able to learn and grow and develop, and they're there to support and encourage you in your journey to enlightenment. So you'll have confirmed confidence in these 3 things. This is referred to as the triple gem or the triple jewel. You would need all 3 of these in order to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment and enlightenment itself. But when someone first starts, they typically don't have confidence, and that's normal. So if you don't have confidence right now in these 3 things, it's okay. That's where you are in your practice. Everyone's going to develop at their own pace. But if you slowly learn and grow and develop, you'll ultimately get to the point where you'll see more and more improvement to the condition of your mind, and you will gain this confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. And in order to get to enlightenment or even the first stage, you would need to have confidence in the Buddha. you would need to have access to his teachings, and you need to be part of a community. If you just had one of these things, or even two of these things, you wouldn't actually be able to make your way to the first stage of enlightenment or enlightenment itself. So if I had confidence in the Buddha, but I didn't have access to his teachings and I wasn't part of a community, I wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. Or if I had access to his teachings, but I didn't have confidence in him and I wasn't part of a community, I wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. Or if I was just part of a community and I didn't have confidence in him and I didn't have access to his teachings, an individual's not going to be able to get to enlightenment. So you need all three of these. So whenever there's the number 3 in Buddhism, it's referring to the triple gem or the triple jewel, the confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. And then another quality of mind that an individual will have getting to the first stage of enlightenment is that they will have eliminated a certain amount of unwise moral conduct, that they would have been practicing moral conduct to a certain degree, which, as the Buddha is describing here, it leads to concentration. That when he's talking about possesses the virtues dear to the noble ones, what he's talking about is the qualities of improving your moral conduct, the qualities of mind like mindfulness and loving kindness and compassion and things like this, practicing generosity. All these kinds of things are what an individual is going to be practicing. They haven't perfected it yet, but they've gathered up everything that they need to be able to get to that first stage of enlightenment. So these 4 things is what a stream enterer will be practicing. So as we look at this a little bit closer, we can glean some more detail here, where the Buddha talks about here that someone who's entered into the first stage of enlightenment, he's saying if he aspires, could by himself declare thus of himself. What this means is that you will know yourself that you've gotten to this first stage of enlightenment. This isn't like you're going to go out into the world and put on your Facebook page that you're a stream enterer and be boastful and arrogant and things like this. But essentially what the Buddha is saying is that you will know for yourself that you are an actual stream enterer at that point, because you would have studied the teachings well enough and you would know what it takes to be able to get to that first stage of enlightenment. And in January, I teach a retreat where everything in that retreat is what you need to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. You won't be in the first stage of enlightenment by the end of the retreat, but you will have all the teachings that you need to be able to make your way to the first stage of enlightenment. And you're most likely going to need to take that retreat more than one time. So here you can see that the Buddha is describing that you will know that you've actually gotten to the first stage of enlightenment. Then he talks about himself, saying that somebody would have confidence in him, because you're going to need that confidence. When you're eliminating the conditioned pleasant feelings and it doesn't quite feel so intuitive at first, or you're trying to realize non-self and you're feeling kind of scared and fearful, or you're trying to let go of something and you're feeling those painful feelings as a result, you're going to need that confidence in the Buddha and know that he's leading you to this improved state of mind. And this is what he's describing here. Then you can see when he talks about his teachings, he's talking about how these teachings are directly visible, meaning that you can independently verify them for yourself, that they're not based in belief, that they're immediate, meaning that once you implement his teachings, they're immediately beneficial. They're inviting one to come and see. What he's talking about here is coming to investigate his teachings and examine his teachings. Remember, his teachings, you will never see in his teachings where he says, just believe me. He says just the opposite. Come, investigate my teachings. Come examine them. Because he knows if you examine them close enough, you're going to be able to see that they lead to an improved condition of mind and an improved condition of life. So that's why he says, inviting one to come and see. Applicable, meaning you can apply these teachings during his lifetime and long into the future, until the end of time, because he's describing the natural laws of existence, and these natural laws don't change. So these teachings are applicable to any aspect of life, and they need to be personally experienced by the wise, meaning you need to implement the teachings into your day-to-day life. You need to practice the teachings. Then he talks about the community. He's talking about the community of the perfectly enlightened one, because during his lifetime, there were multiple people who were teaching and claiming that it was their teachings that were leading to enlightenment. But he knew it was his teachings that were leading to enlightenment. So he referred to his students as practicing the wholesome way, practicing the straight way, practicing the true way, practicing the proper way, right? Because he knew that it was his teachings that led to enlightenment, even though other people were practicing other things. And then he talks about these 4 pairs of persons. What this is anyone who's practicing for the realization of the first stage of enlightenment, of stream entry, or an individual who's in the stage of the first stage of enlightenment as a stream enter. Anybody who's practicing for the realization of the second stage of enlightenment, which is the once returner, and the once returner itself. Then anyone practicing for the realization of the third stage of enlightenment, which is non-returner, or an individual who's in the stage of non-returning, or anyone practicing for the realization of arahantship, or being an enlightened being, the 4th stage of enlightenment, and someone who's in the 4th stage of enlightenment itself. So those are the 4 pairs of individuals. It's the 4 stages of enlightenment, and anyone who's practicing to get into one of those stages, or anyone who's in one of those 4 stages. So he refers to them as the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 types of individuals. This is what a community who's truly practicing the teachings closely is going to have. They're going to have plenty of people who are in one of these 4 stages of enlightenment, or practicing to be able to get into one of those 4 stages of enlightenment. And he's saying that these are the individuals that are worthy of gifts, hospitality, offerings, reverential or respectful salutation, an unsurpassed field of merit for the world. Because if all these household practitioners were supporting all these various ascetics who were roaming around and accepting offerings, what the Buddha is saying is, if you support these individuals who are actually in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, or practicing to get into one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, that's where the real merit is. That's where the real benefit is, because now the teachings can flourish and come into the world more and more. So he incentivized people and encouraged people to make offerings to these types of individuals that are in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, or practicing to get into one of the 4 stages of enlightenment. Because people were sharing offerings with all kinds of people. They didn't know how to determine whether someone was in one stage of enlightenment or another. And then, as I mentioned, he teaches about this moral conduct and these qualities of mind to cultivate. So these are 4 aspects that one would have developed in order to get into the first stage of enlightenment, but there's other things as well. And you're going to see some of those today. And then as we read this entire book, you're going to see all the different things that the Buddha is describing that a person who's in the first stage of enlightenment would need to practice and develop in their mind. And then that retreat in January is something that you can learn as well, because it's been recorded, and I'm going to be teaching it again this January, so that you can actually learn in that particular retreat all the teachings that you need, not only from the book like we're doing in this program, but from a teacher teaching you in a more methodical way and kind of laying it out in an order and a sequence that you need to learn it in. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this first chapter. Looks like we have a few people with questions. Go ahead, Marcy.
I'm actually lowering my hand, Teacher David. You answered my question. I wanted just to get clarification on the 4 pairs of persons and 8 individuals. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, Vibhav, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, David. One was an observation, and one was a simple question, I think. So one here, when he says that, can you please go down a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, it's a little bit up. It's a little bit up, sorry. One more up, a little bit up, more up. Yeah, so here when he says the perfectly enlightened one is an arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplishing true wisdom and conduct, fortunate, knower of the worlds. This seems to be the 3rd chant, the Itipisu Bhagava. It's the same, right? It's the same chant, right?
It's similar, yeah. It's very similar.
It's similar.
Mm-hmm.
And this shows up in other places. So that was the observation.
Mm-hmm.
The question was on the mirror, so is he saying that the person at this point is a mirror of the teachings? The stream enter becomes a mirror of the teachings. Is that the, I guess, a suggestion of this teaching discourse, that once the person gets into the first stage, it becomes a mirror of the teachings? Is that what he's saying here.
Yeah, this is like how someone's being reflective of the teachings, that this is the qualities that they're reflecting out into the world, that they're projecting out into the world, that they have these confidence in these three things, and they've improved their moral conduct and the condition of their mind to a certain extent. And he gives you details on what that is as you go further. This is just kind of an introductory chapter. But yeah, an individual who's a stream enter is going to be practicing the teachings. This is how we know whether someone's in the first, second, third, or fourth stage of enlightenment. You know, the goal isn't to go off into the world and try to determine whether someone's in the first, second, third, or fourth stage of enlightenment. But if you're looking for a teacher or you're looking for someone to make offerings to, it would be really helpful to be able to know if somebody's in one of the first, second, third, fourth stage of enlightenment. And this is one of the ways you can use this is, yes, as a guide for you to be able to guide you to get to the first stage of enlightenment and beyond. But also when you're looking for a potential teacher, you're looking to make offerings, you would like to look for someone who has confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and is practicing a certain level of moral conduct. I was watching a YouTube video just for probably 2 or 3 minutes a couple of weeks ago, where there was actually a well-known monk who was actually slandering the Buddha in his discourse on YouTube. He was saying that the Buddha lies sometimes. Half the time the Buddha talked, he lies. And here right away, when you hear that, it's like, whoa, this person doesn't even have confidence in the Buddha, and they're slandering and gossiping about the Buddha. You probably would like to, think twice about whether you would learn with somebody like that, because these things can help you to navigate your way to the first stage of enlightenment, but can also help you to be able to see if you're looking to receive guidance from a particular person, you would like to see that they have these kinds of qualities, because that person who's got confirmed confidence in the Buddha, they would know that the Buddha indeed was practicing very closely, because as they learned and practiced his teachings, they saw the improvement to their mind in their life, and they wouldn't have this, lying and slander about the Buddha. Instead, they would have this confirmed confidence in him. So that's where a chapter like this really comes in to help you.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
The second, I have a smaller other question. So, so in the three jewels, we have confidence in the Buddha, we have confidence in the teachings. The community part is, we have a community, but it's kind of at least for me living here, the community part seems to be a little bit weaker, because there's not much interaction with the rest of the people in the community. When you're trying to build something here, I know a few people that are in the Bay Area, but that part is still, I guess, we don't have that much of a interaction. So how does that affect the getting to this first stage of life?
Yeah, so as you get into the community more and more, you'll start interacting in the community more and more. So like the event that you're hosting in March, you're bringing me to California, and you're going to meet some students who are currently studying with me that they don't necessarily show up to live classes, but I know these people are planning to come to the course and the retreat in March. So you'll get to interact with people there. And then there'll be new students there too that will develop inside of our community. And you'll see that our community will just continue to grow and grow and grow and flourish. And then that's where gradually you'll gain more and more confidence, because you have more and more interaction in the community. And at some point you might end up coming here to Chiang Mai again. And over time, you'll spend more and more time with different members of the community. Like you came down to Mexico and you met Victoria when you were down there, and maybe a couple of other people as well. So this is how, like, as you start to spend more and more time around the community, you'll see that there's just loving and kind and warm and gentle and friendly, respectful, polite people that are part of our community, people that are cultivating these wholesome qualities. It's like, wow, you'll have more and more confidence in this community to see like these larger and larger numbers of people that are coming together and practicing the teachings really well.
Okay. So one last question just popped up. I was talking about the temple that I was visiting to try to see if they were interested in holding an event. They were actually, they have a restaurant outside the temple, I guess, to ensure that they have some earnings for the temple. And they're actually selling meat there. Like, I mean, there's like, regular Thai food, but like meat based as well. Is that advisable for the temple to sell like meat products?
I wouldn't do that if I was the leader of a temple, but if somebody else chooses to do that, that's their choice. And, everybody is at different places in their development. And, you would think that every single temple is learning these teachings closely and practicing them closely, but it's just not the way that it is. That would be permanent, right? So each one of these temples are independently operated, and depending on who the abbot is at that temple, then the rest of the ordained practitioners there and the community members are going to be practicing based on that person's teachings. And you had shared some other things with me about what had gone on at that temple, and you can see that there's not really a well-developed practice there. And that's part of what is wise to factor into any decisions about whether to host an event there, or whether you would be involved in a community like that, or if you are involved, knowing the kind of things that they are choosing to do. And this isn't as a way to look down on them or be conceitful or anything like that, but you just are aware of what the teachings are and what would be wise to practice. And when you see other people aren't practicing it, you just understand where they are in their practice, and you have loving kindness and compassion for them, that this is where they are in their practice. And if they ask you questions about practice, then you share it with them. But oftentimes people who aren't really studying the true teachings, they're not really looking for those things. Those kinds of places typically are into rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship. And when you see those kinds of things, then you know they're not actually studying the real teachings to be able to cultivate the mind and develop wisdom and actually get to enlightenment.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, looks like Marcy, you have a question? Go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Teacher David. You had touched on this about being able to recognize a stream enterer, or one of a person that's in one of those four pairs. During the Buddha's lifetime, because he was very close with his practitioners, there wasn't a way of like stretching across like we have internet today. I don't want to assume, but he probably was able to delineate where his students were in those pairs. Am I correct for understanding that?
Yes.
Okay, so with an individual on this journey trying to delineate whether or not they've had growth on the path, or if they are in one of these things, one of these stages, I feel the mind is somewhat a little bit challenged by it, because I do recognize that I have, absorbed a certain amount of the teachings and have been practicing a certain amount of the teachings, not to full fruition, obviously, because I'm not an enlightened being, but I still, just to give an example, I do have a back issue that I have been trying to mend with swimming, yoga, things of that nature. But there's times where my job puts a lot of pressure on my back, and then there's some significant discomfort. And a way to relieve that is to ingest a small amount of CBD, but it also has some THC in it. Now, I don't ingest a large quantity of it. I just ingest enough to give enough relief to be able to stretch the back out, to relax the muscles. But that's ingesting a substance that may cause heedlessness or less awareness of the mind. So is that because I am still practicing somewhat of that type of therapeutic medicine? Would that opt me out of one of these stages, or just this stage of stream enterer? I don't know if I'm being clear, Teacher David. I'm just having a little struggle here.
Yeah, I understand what you're sharing. So you're going to see a discourse in a moment where the Buddha talks about, in order to get into the first stage of enlightenment, you would need to be practicing the 5 precepts. And the issue that you're having with pain in the back, if you really need to solve that with medication, there should be some other medications that you could use other than marijuana or cannabis. Oftentimes people are turning to this nowadays, but the times where I've seen that this is like an absolute necessity is like I've seen research studies of children that have like 20 seizures a day, and they put a little bit of CBD oil on their tongue, like one drop, and they don't have any more seizures for 6 months just with that one drop of CBD oil. Where oftentimes what we do is revert to these things in order to address the pain, when in reality there's other things that you could be doing. And these kinds of things can hinder you from making progress on the path. So you would like to look at some other options. And then I'll share this with you too, because I just had this conversation with a student in a private session, because he's doing microdosing of cannabis as well for headaches. And we were talking about some different things, and I was even relating it to a challenge that I had as I was progressing on the path, where I had these back pains. And I apologize for the story, but I'll tell you guys this story because you'll understand this particular topic. Okay. So I was having all this back pain, and I, have a little bit extra weight, and I was having all this back pain, and I was getting to the point where every single time I experienced this back pain, I wanted to be comfortable. Had a certain level of craving for the body to be permanently comfortable. And I would go off and get a massage because that's what I was used to. I was in the massage business. I was a massage practitioner at one time. So I understood that massage helps with pain relief. So I would go get massages. If I felt even the slightest little bit of back pain, I would go get a massage. Well, here in Thailand, a lot of the places, they're offering a happy ending. They're offering to essentially stimulate the male sexual organ at the end of the massage or sometime during the massage. And in some cases, they were doing this without me even asking. They were doing it without asking me too, that they were just doing it. And typically what they'll do is they'll usually ask, they'll say, hey, do you like this? And I would be like, no, I'm not interested. Thank you so much. I appreciate your offer, or whatever I would say. I probably didn't say I appreciate your offer, but whatever I would say, I would just kind of like end that conversation. I would just get the massage. And it was nice because I would be able to get this massage. But there were frequent situations that I was finding myself in where they were starting to do that without me even indicating anything, which long in the past, I might have done those kinds of things, but I wasn't interested in that anymore. So this craving to have permanent comfort was ending up having me go to these massage businesses, which was then, that could be sometimes 6 months without having any kind of orgasm or ejaculation. And I would be in this massage center and I'd be feeling all peaceful and all joyful, and I'd be getting my massage. The next thing they know, they're sitting there doing that and there's an ejaculation. And it's like, whoa, I'm like starting over. Like I just had 6 months of time where the mind was really peaceful. And now I needed to experience a bit of agitation for a few days or a few weeks in order to get my mind back away from that central desire that was being stimulated, not as a result of my decision 100%, but from this other person. So I realized that what was the decision that I was making that was leading to this situation? And I realized, I'm craving this permanent comfort of the body, and I'm ending up choosing to go to these massage businesses. So then I started trying some other things. I started doing just a Thai massage, which is clothed, where you just have clothes on. But even then they were propositioning me and they were trying to, stimulate me in some ways. So I got to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to deal with the pain. I'm just going to kind of stretch my back and kind of see what can happen. And I'm going to avoid the massage businesses 100%. And this was my way of making sure that I could maintain the decision to not be in a situation where this central desire had the potential to arise in the mind. And that's what I needed to do in order to completely get away from that 100%. But I had to go through some physical pain in order to get to that point. So you're going to need to get to the point where you don't have a craving for this body to be permanently comfortable. And you're going to need to go through some pain in order to get onto the other side of that, because that central desire that kept arising, it was keeping me trapped. Because once the mind is tranquil, the body is going to be tranquil too. I experience minor little back pain here and there, but it's nothing that I can't lay on the floor and stretch out and it's completely gone. But before, when I had this central desire and this craving, it was actually producing more back pain, which was driving me into the massage business, which was producing more sensual desire. So you kind of stay stuck in the cycle, and you got to figure out how to step away from that. And the first thing would be to eliminate any craving for permanent comfort of the body, to eliminate the cannabis and look for another alternative, whether it's heat packs or baths or stretching out your back, whether it's another medicine that doesn't produce heedlessness. You need to be able to look at these kinds of things, because as long as the mind is craving permanent comfort, when you feel that little discomfort, your mind's going to turn to something like a cannabis, and now you're going to stay stuck in that continuous cycle over and over and over again. So again, I apologize for this story. It's a very personal story that I haven't really shared other than in private conversations, but I think it's helpful for you guys, and I don't mind sharing it. But if any of you guys were offended by this story, then I apologize for that. But of course, it's just words. I didn't cause anybody to be offended. It's one's own mind that would cause that. But I just share this with you guys because I think it can help you to see how the mind can stay stuck if you aren't willing to go through a bit of pain in order to get to the other side of this.
Teacher David, so would a good plan of to combat this, because when you say that cycle, like it clicked, like there is a cycle. I have the discomfort. I want to relieve the discomfort because I want to be able to stretch my back out so that I'm using the word want because that's what the mind is thinking. I want to be able to be physically fit for the next day of work. So would it be beneficial for me to take the mind and say, okay, this is the pain. The cycle is you're going to want to go to cannabis, but we're not going to go to cannabis. We're going to try to stretch without ingesting anything, like go through that kind of pain there and just kind of slowly progress through it.
Yes. I had to go through about 2 months of kind of mild pain here and there in order to get to the other side, where now I very rarely experience pain at all, because I had to get rid of that central desire. That central desire is going to keep the pain going on. So you're going to need to get to the point where you're walking through the fire to appreciate the fresh air on the other side. Or another way to think about it is you're getting out of the mafia. And getting into the mafia was quite pleasant, but now you got to leave. And you got to get away from the mafia, and now it's going to be painful to get out. So you got to get out of this mafia of holding on to the cannabis, craving for this body to be permanently comfortable. Do some breathing techniques, do some stretching. If you need some other types of medicines, use some other types of medicines. But you ultimately need to get to the point where you understand and you're comfortable with this body is going to need to experience some pain from time to time. And that's normal. No matter how enlightened you are, you're going to experience some degree of pain. But as long as you have central desire in there and you're craving permanent comfort, there's going to be a heightened level of physical pain. But if you can get rid of that central desire more and more, the pain will actually minimize.
Heightened level of pain. That makes so much sense. So much sense. My last question, Teacher David. I have noticed that the mind now, when out in the community and stuff, and hearing other beings speak, I am recognizing the Buddha's teachings in their speech and their actions and stuff. Is this normal to start? I've noticed it seems to be a lot more where I'm starting to pick up and notice like, oh, wow, that's the Buddha's teaching. Oh, the Buddha teaches that. And I'm noticing it in people. Is that normal? It just almost seems like the mind is like this hyper focus on just, I don't know, like recognizing the teachings, I guess. I don't know how else to explain it.
Yeah, this is normal. This is what you're going to do is as you have more and more wisdom, you'll see the teachings all around you. And this is what the Buddha talked about when he was preparing for death. He said, one who sees me sees the teachings, and one who sees the teachings sees me. So when you look around the world and you see his teachings all around you, you see him. And this is what's helping you to get confidence in him, because you can see like, wow, his teachings are everywhere. People that haven't even studied them are actually practicing them in some cases to a certain degree. So when you're seeing the teachings out and about in the world, it's confirming for you that, yes, these are the natural laws of existence because you can see them. They're directly visible, right? Like he talks about here. They're directly visible.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Teacher David. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay. I don't see any other questions anywhere. So these next series of these next series of discourses are very similar. So we're going to be able to skip over these. If you guys have read these, it's wise to go ahead and read these, but it's the same 4 things that the Buddha is talking about, but he's just basically talking about it in a slightly different world or a slightly different way as he's going through these. Okay. So he's got all 4 of those same things, and he's just talking about it with a slightly different opening and a slightly different ending. Okay. And then he's got the same thing down here. You can see all my words here to help you guys to understand what he's teaching and reflect on it. Here's another one where he's talking to this individual as well. And he's talking about how these 4 things slant, slope, and incline towards enlightenment, that this is what you're going to need in order to lean towards enlightenment. And it's those same 4 things, but he's just describing it in a slightly different way. Okay. And now we go to chapter 4. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, it looks like Samantha, and then we'll go to Keely and Mayuli after that.
A stream enterer possesses the noble eightfold path. Sariputta, this is said, a stream enterer, a stream enterer. What now, Sariputta, is a stream enterer? One who possesses this noble eightfold path, Venerable Sir, is called a stream enterer, this venerable one of such a name and clan. Good, Sariputta. One who possesses this noble eightfold path is a stream enterer, this venerable one of such a name and clan.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So here, this is another criteria of getting to the first stage of enlightenment. So as I mentioned, each one of these discourses is giving you further details of what you need in order to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. And as I've shared all throughout your time of learning with me, the Eightfold Path is a fundamental teaching. It's a foundational teaching. It's a core teaching that you wouldn't be able to make any real progress on your journey to enlightenment without knowing the Eightfold Path inside and out, backwards and forwards, left, right, up, down. And it's the same thing here. In order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you would have needed to develop the Eightfold Path to a certain degree. So this is a prerequisite for any aspect of the path to enlightenment, is to really soak into the Eightfold Path. So your first 3 months, 6 months, or even a year on your journey to enlightenment might have been just dissecting the Eightfold Path with the words of the Buddha and really dialing that in closer and closer in your life. So you would need that in order to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment, among all the other things that we're going to be discussing as part of this book and as part of the retreat that I'm going to be teaching in August. So let me know if you guys have questions on this one. Okay, yeah, I didn't suspect you guys would have questions. This is something you guys have been hearing all the way through learning with me. Okay, is there someone who would like to read chapter 5? Oh, it was Keely, that's right. Let's see. There's Keely. All right, go ahead, ma'am.
Eliminating the 5 dangers and hostels as a stream enterer. Householder, when a noble disciple has eliminated 5 dangers and hostels, possesses the 4 factors of stream entry, and has clearly seen and thoroughly penetrated with wisdom the noble method, he might, if he so aspires, declare of himself, I am one finished with hell, the animal realm, the realm of afflicted spirits, finished with the plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. I am a stream enterer, no longer subject to rebirth in the lower world, fixed in destiny, heading for enlightenment. What are the 5 dangers and hostels that have been eliminated? First, householder, one who destroys life with the destruction of life as condition, creates danger and hostility pertaining to the present life and danger, and hostility pertaining to future lives. And he also experiences mental pain and sadness. One who abstains from the destruction of life does not create such danger and hostility pertaining to the present life, or such danger or hostility pertaining to future lives. Nor does he experience pain and sadness. For one who attains from the destruction of life, that danger and hostility has thus been eliminated. Second, one who takes what is not given, with taking what is not given as condition, creates danger and hostility pertaining to the present life, and danger and hostility pertaining to future lives. And he also experiences mental pain and sadness. One who abstains from taking what is not given does not create such danger and hostility pertaining to the present life, or such danger and hostility pertaining to future lives, nor does he experience mental pain or sadness. For one who abstains from taking what is not given, that danger and hostility has thus been eliminated. Third, one who engages in sexual misconduct, with sexual misconduct as condition, creates danger and hostility pertaining to the present life, and danger and hostility pertaining to future lives, and he also experiences mental pain and sadness. One who abstains from sexual misconduct does not create such danger and hostility pertaining to the present life, or such danger and hostility pertaining to future lives, nor does he experience mental pain and sadness. For one who abstains from sexual misconduct, that danger and hostility has thus been eliminated. Fourth, one who speaks falsely with false speech as condition creates danger and hostility pertaining to the present life, and danger and hostility pertaining to future lives, and he also experiences mental pain and sadness. One who abstains from false speech does not create such danger and hostility pertaining to the present life, or such danger and hostility pertaining to future lives, nor does he experience mental pain and sadness. For one who abstains from false speech, that danger and hostility has thus been eliminated. Fifth, one who indulges in liquor, wine, and substances that cause unawareness of mind, the basis of hiddenness, with indulgence in liquor, wine, and substances that cause unawareness of mind as condition, creates danger and hostility pertaining to the present life, and danger and hostility pertaining to future lives, and he also experiences mental pain and sadness. One who abstains from liquor, wine, and substances that cause unawareness of mind, the basis for hiddenness, does not create such danger and hostility pertaining to the present life, or such danger and hostility pertaining to future lives, nor does he experience mental pain and sadness. For one who abstains from liquor, wine, and substance that cause an awareness of mind, the basis for hiddenness, that danger and hostility has thus been eliminated. These are the 5 dangers and hostilities that have been eliminated. And what are the 4 factors of stream entry that he possesses?
We don't need to read all of this, Keely. This is what we've already been studying, these 4. So we can pick it up right here. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is what we studied in the first chapter. So rather than just reading that, because this is a pretty long chapter, rather than reading this all over again, since we just studied it, You can pick it up right here with this one.
Okay, where I cannot see it.
Oh, okay. That's right. You have a delay, I think, in your internet.
Yeah, okay. So and what is the noble method that he has clearly seen and thoroughly penetrated with wisdom? Here, householder, the noble disciple reflects thus: when this exists, that comes to be, with the arising of this that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be, with the elimination of this that is eliminated. That is with ignorance as condition, volitional formations, choices, decisions come to be, with volitional formations as condition, consciousness with consciousness as condition, name and form with name and form as condition, the six sense basis with the six sense basis as condition, contact with contact as condition, feeling with feeling as condition, craving with craving as condition, clinging with clinging as condition, existence with existence as condition, birth with birth as condition, old age and death, sorrow, grief, pain, sadness, and misery come to. Such is the course of this whole mass of discontentedness.
We don't need to read this part either. I'm sorry, Keely, to stop you. It's really long. And what the Buddha is talking about here is the elimination of these things, which I'll talk about in a moment. But you can pick it up right here.
This is the noble method that he has already seen and thoroughly penetrated with wisdom. Householder, when a noble disciple has eliminated these five dangers and hostels, and he possesses these four factors of stream entry, and he has clearly seen and thoroughly penetrated with wisdom this noble method, he might, if he also aspires, declare of himself, I'm one finished with hell, the animal realm, the realm of afflicted spirits, finished with the plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. I am a stream enterer, no longer subject to rebirth in the lower world, fixed in destiny, heading for enlightenment. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So this is a pretty long discourse here. And what the Buddha is talking about are these five dangers and hostilities that are eliminated for an individual who is a stream enterer. And the first thing that he talks about here is the five precepts, that an individual who is in the first stage of enlightenment will be practicing the five precepts perfectly. I was talking to a person about a good year or so ago that was trying to tell me that a person in the first stage of enlightenment actually still drinks alcohol and still gets intoxicated. And I was like, no, this just isn't true. And you can actually see it here in the words of the Buddha, that the Buddha actually shares this. And here, as we were talking about substances, there are substances like marijuana that does produce heedlessness, but it can be used in some situations for certain medical issues. And in those situations, what I would advise somebody to do is try to discover any other options that are out there that don't produce heedlessness that could potentially address a particular health issue. And if they can find a remedy or a solution, like using the example of Marcy, whether it's stretching or breathing techniques or other types of medication, wonderful. Explore all those options first. But there's going to be those rare individuals, like the example I gave you of a child who is having seizures and they get one drop of the CBD oil and they don't have seizures for 6 months. So in those situations, they've already explored many other options and there's just nothing else out there. And this is the one thing that they have available to them. And they might use it very, sporadically or not very significant amounts of it and things of this nature. And then someday there might be some technology that comes out that they can maybe move or migrate to, that they don't need to even take that particular thing. So an individual who's practicing to the point of being in the first stage of enlightenment would understand the five precepts really well. And you would need to go into volume 1, chapter 7 to be able to see the words of the Buddha there and how the Buddha actually teaches them through his own words and how to actually apply them in your day-to-day life. Sometimes people think the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants. But you can see through his words that he didn't teach that way. That sounds like black and white, and the Buddha didn't teach like that. And it also sounds like a bunch of rules and commandments, and the Buddha didn't teach that way. So you're going to need to know the 5 precepts and practice them very well, because when you first look at the 5 precepts, it looks like there's this big gray area in between. But the more that you become familiar with the 5 precepts, it'll be very clear to you of what would be wise to do in any one given situation based on your understanding of the natural laws. So if you're not quite there yet, that's something that you're going to need to do, is really investigate Volume 1, Chapter 7, so that you can understand the 5 precepts really well and then get help where you need help. Then, of course, what we were just talking about, a stream mentor is going to have those 4 things: the confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and there's going to be moral conduct that is being practiced from the Eightfold Path. Then he talks about dependent origination. He talks about this is the noble method. This is something we're going to be studying next week in Chapter 14, that in order to get into the first stage of enlightenment, you will understand the dependent origination. And oftentimes it takes people multiple times to learn it and to investigate it and to sit with it to be able to understand it. You know, when you first start off on your journey to enlightenment, you learn about the universal truth of impermanence. You know, in about 2 or 3 minutes, I teach it to you. You look around the world, 5 minutes, you got it, right? Discontentedness, same thing. You know, universal truth of non-self, it takes a little bit of really sinking into that to be able to understand it. But things like right speech and right actions, it's like, yeah, I got that. You know, you're not necessarily practicing it perfectly, but you understand it. As you progress closer and closer to the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to be getting meatier teachings that you really need to sink your teeth into. And you're going to probably get exposed to them. You're going to get introduced to them. You're going to be taught them. You're going to need to step away and reflect on it. You're going to need to ask questions about it. You're going to need to think about it. And maybe in some cases, a year or 2 later, you actually understand that teaching and you actually see how to apply it. Dependent origination for some people is that way. Some people get it right away. Other people, they don't. So when we study dependent origination next week, you'll see that what it does is it teaches you why you keep coming into the world over and over and over again in a way that you can independently verify. And it also shows you the detail of why you keep experiencing discontentedness over and over and over again. Where the Four Noble Truths just gives you a window into that and kind of peer into it with 4 simple statements, dependent origination is giving you the details, the work. So if you ever had a math teacher that when you used to do math, you would just write the answer on a page and they were like, no, go back and show me your work. The dependent origination teaching, this is showing you the work. This is showing you step by step. And what you're doing with dependent origination, as you guys will hear next week, is you're looking to dismantle it. And you're dismantling it by eliminating this first condition. If you can eliminate this first condition of ignorance, then all the other aspects of dependent origination start to be dismantled. And that's why you've been guided from the very beginning. Your very first class with me is to not believe anything that I teach you, and don't believe anything in the books. Is to cultivate wisdom, because that's what's going to dismantle dependent origination. It's going to eradicate ignorance. And now you can get to the point where you experience enlightenment and you won't experience continuous rebirth. And you'll see that this is occurring as your mind's becoming more and more peaceful. So we're going to dive into this in more clarity. But here, this is where the Buddha is explaining that an individual who's in the first stage of enlightenment would have penetrated into this noble method. They would have clearly seen and thoroughly penetrated it with wisdom. It's dependent origination. They're not yet having dismantled it, because you don't dismantle it until you're actually enlightened. When the mind's enlightened, that's when dependent origination is fully destroyed. But up to the point of the first stage of enlightenment, you've at least understood it. And it's going to take you, like I mentioned, multiple times to really learn it in some cases. And that's, a lot of people are that way. So the Buddha here is talking about you will have understood what dependent origination is, but then you will also understand how to eradicate it and how to eliminate it. That's this part that we didn't read that I asked Keely to skip over, because it's the same thing. It's just talking about elimination. So that's what we're going to be studying next week in chapter 14. And then the Buddha just sums this up and saying, okay, these are the things that a person in the first stage of enlightenment will be developed in practice. The 5 precepts, they will have the confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and they would have developed their moral conduct, and they would understand the dependent origination. And these are just 3 things, along with all the other things that you're going to be learning in this book. There's a whole litany of things that you're going to need to learn in order to get into that first stage of enlightenment, in practice as well. One of the ways that I think about the first stage of enlightenment is it's kind of like an individual is getting prepared to go to the summit of Mount Everest. And in order to get to the summit of Mount Everest, you need to first get to base camp. But before you get to base camp, you have to go out and do all kinds of other hikes. You need to learn about all the equipment. You need to learn about all the methods of hiking. You're not going to just stumble your way into base camp at Mount Everest. Has anybody ever stumbled their way into base camp at Mount Everest? I don't think so. There's a lot of intention of getting to the base camp of Mount Everest. You've done a lot of preliminary work. And now that you're at base camp at Mount Everest, you've got all the tools and equipment you need to be able to get to the summit, but you just haven't gotten there yet. It's going to take time to be able to now get to the summit, but at least you've acquired the things you need. You've got the tools and equipment. You've got some skills and ability. You got a tour guide maybe with you, like a teacher who's helping you along the way. You've got all these things at your fingertips, and now you're at base camp. And now you can make your way to the summit, but you're hanging out at base camp for a while. And that's what the first stage of enlightenment is. And the Buddha's showing you through all these discourses in this book of volume 5 of all the different things that you're going to need to collect up and make sure you have at your disposal, that you have at your fingertips to now be able to make your way to enlightenment so that you can get to base camp. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, or you can raise your hand in Zoom. So it looks like Samantha has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
I just wanted a little, clarification on substances that cause heedlessness. So caffeine is one that's been mentioned in the past. And I drink green tea in the morning for just its physical benefits. And if I don't drink it, I don't have headaches. It, doesn't cause my heart to race, doesn't... I guess caffeine doesn't have the effect on me that it does for others. So I'm wondering if that is still something that I could consume, or maybe in the case of Marcy, like she's taking something for her back, if it doesn't actually have the effect of heedlessness, but rather just more comfort for the body, is that still something that you have to avoid just because it's a substance that for other people might cause heedlessness?
What you'll notice is as you're training your mind and you're getting rid of more and more of these pollutions, your mind's going to become more sensitive to these things. Where right now that green tea might be not really affecting you, but as you're training more and more, you're going to notice more effect. I got to a point where one time I went into a coffee shop. I was waiting for my son. He was at school, and I ordered a cold cocoa. And I was just like, I can't drink anything else here. There's a cold cocoa. Let me just get that. And I took a sip out of it. And it was like, whoa, I really noticed. And I didn't know that cocoa had caffeine in it. And I sat there on my phone and I looked, and it says that it has 1/8 of the amount of caffeine as a coffee. Right. I used to drink, 3, 4, 5, 6 big tall glasses of coffee each day and, experiencing whatever I was experiencing. And now here I am drinking a sip that has 1/8 of the amount of a cup of coffee. And whoa, I really noticed it. So if you step away from that caffeine in the green tea, you're going to notice that you're going to get even more clarity and more crispness in your mind. And then if you're away from it for a period of time, you'll notice that it actually has more effect. You kind of build up a tolerance to it, just like alcohol, that you might drink that 1 cup and it feels like there's no effect there, that you don't notice anything different. But if you get away from it for an extended period of time and you notice your mind becoming more crisp and more sharp and more focused, you'll be like, whoa, that green tea was really affecting me and I didn't realize that. And then let's just say you happen to have a sip of something like I did many months later, many years later, you'll notice that difference that you didn't notice while you were actually ingesting it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so Marcy, you're next. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. Thank you, Samantha, for that question. That helped me have some more clarity too. Teacher David, a person that is aspiring on this mission to become a stream enterer, these core teachings that he's speaking of in this book, would these teachings be like right at the top of the mind, readily available? Is that the mission, is to get these teachings so they're right there? They're right on the tip of your brain, your mind, solidified there, so that as you're going through, life, as you're meeting challenges and obstacles, the mind's going to go right to the teachings to get the answer or to make the choice.
Exactly. You're upgrading your operating system of your mind. Like if somebody said, hey, Marcy, what are the 5 aggregates? Bloop, 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 bloop. You could just list them right out. What are the 4 things that the Buddha talks about confidence again? What are those 4 things that you need to have confidence in? You would say, just rattle them right off. You'd be able to explain it to that person because you've internalized it and you're practicing it very closely. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, they did the chanting in order to really internalize it. But what you're going to need to do is study with the books, study with the classes, and really internalize it and memorize this. And you're practicing it so deeply by the time you get to the first stage, and definitely to enlightenment itself, that it's effortless for you to be able to explain it to somebody if they ever asked you. I think you're frozen up there, Marcy.
Yeah, when I first started learning with you, I did do a lot of repeating of the teachings, and I would do this, one morning in the evening, and the mind seemed to have been more clear at that time. I think once I got out into the world, it was a little bit more challenging obstacles came about, so it was almost like that downward part. So now I'm trying to build back up. So maybe I might just try re-chanting them again to try to solidify them more. My last other question is, Teacher David, that poster that you have that goes, this is the 5 precepts, it's got the 10 fetters, it's got all that stuff in blocks. I tried to print that out to be able to put it up on my wall to have as a visual reminder. But it prints out and it's very blurred. Is there any way to actually purchase that poster? Is there an option to purchase that poster? Because I'd like to purchase one.
Yeah, I have them printed out really nicely here, and it's a lot less expensive to print it out here. If you would like me to send it to you, maybe you can contact me and we can talk about it, and I can let you know what you would need to do to reimburse me just for the expense to be able to send it to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Teacher David. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. And if there's other people in the U.S. that are interested in that, maybe we can do a whole bundle where either I bring it in March when I come and then we can ship them out from the U.S., or maybe somebody gets 10 or 20 of them at their house and then sends them out from there. So maybe there's other people in the U.S. that would like some. And if that's the case, maybe you guys can all kind of get together and then I can just do one kind of shipment and it'll cut down on the cost for you guys. Okay. Marcy, you still have some more?
Yes, I was just going to say, Teacher David, if anything, if I don't mind, if you wanted, we could arrange where you ship me some, and then whoever here in the States wants them, I can ship them out to them, free of charge. I would be willing to do that for everyone. Okay,
it looks like Mayu Lee is saying she would like one as well. So maybe Mayu Lee and Marcy, you guys could get in touch. And then Marcy, you could just let me know. And you can even put a post into the Facebook group if you like and see if there's anybody on there. And then that way I can send 5 or 10 or 20 or however many you guys need.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any questions coming in on Facebook or YouTube. All right, I don't see any. So let's go to the next one then. And I think Mayu Lee, you were the one who had volunteered. It looks like you've got this chapter 6 here. If you'd like to go, ma'am, you're more than welcome. Maybe Mayu Lee stepped away. Oh,
sorry, Sorry, I was having issues unmuting. Okay. I got it now. A stream enterer understands the 5 aggregates. When monks, a noble disciple understands as they really are, the cause and this is the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of these five aggregates subject to clinging. Monks, then he is called the noble disciple who is a stream enterer, no longer bound to the netherworld, fixed in destiny, with enlightenment as his destination.
Okay, thank you, Mayuli. So here what the Buddha is saying is an individual who is a stream enterer would understand the five aggregates: the cause, the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape. So you would need to know the five aggregates. That's the physical form, the feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness, right? The Buddha, when he's giving you these things and he's teaching, he knows that you need to memorize these things. I was going to mention this to you, Marcy, as well, and for the rest of you guys that are interested in memorizing these things. He puts these things in an order for a reason, and it's really helpful to remember them in the order that the Buddha teaches. So for example, like the 6 sense bases, if you take your fingers, it's eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and then the mind itself, right? It's like boop, 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 and then the mind. So he actually orders things in a particular order, where like the physical form for the five aggregates, that's the physical body, but then the feelings, the perceptions, the volitional formations are all inside of the consciousness. So this helps you to be able to remember them in a particular order. It's going to help you if you remember them in that order, because you're going to see them frequently. A stream enterer would understand the five aggregates because this is what helps you to determine what is a living being. And by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you would have seen the natural law of karma very clearly, right? You haven't mastered it yet, but you know that it exists and you know that it's true. And you're not interested in causing any harm to any living beings, because whenever you put out harm, harm is going to come back to you. So that's one of the reasons why you need to understand the five aggregates, is because you're disinterested in causing harm to any living beings, and you need to know what a living being is. And it's the five aggregates, or we refer to them as the five elements or the five collections, or you might think of them as five criteria that determine what is a living being. They're going to have physical form, they're going to have feelings, there's going to be perceptions, which are views and opinions about the world, then there's going to be volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, and then there's going to be a consciousness, which is the mind. And you can independently verify this teaching because you know you're a living being, and you can see you have all five of those things. And then you can also verify it through other living beings, like a squirrel or a cat or a bird. They have all five aggregates. And then you can take something that isn't a living being, like the electronic device that you're listening to this on. You know that this has physical form, but it doesn't have feelings. It doesn't have perceptions. It doesn't have views and opinions. It doesn't make choices and decisions. The only reason why this electronic device is making any decisions is because of us, our interaction with it. Otherwise, it would just sit there and do nothing, right? Then there's the consciousness, that this electronic device doesn't have a consciousness. It doesn't have a mind. So you're going to need to be able to identify a living being so that you don't harm any living beings. That's one reason why you need to know the five aggregates. The second reason is that because you have these five aggregates, the mind has a tendency to cling to them and hold on to them. And as long as you're clinging to the five aggregates, your mind is not going to be enlightened. So you can cling to this physical form, for example, wanting it to be permanently healthy, wanting it to be comfortable all the time, right? That's clinging to the physical form, wanting this permanent comfort, or wanting permanent youthfulness, right? This is clinging to the physical form. When you see a wrinkle, when you see a gray hair or a pimple or a mole, maybe you're shaken up by that. But if you're not clinging to this physical form, then you'll have the peace and joy as a result of that. Then the same thing with the feelings. You might cling to these pleasant feelings, or cling to the painful ones, or your perceptions, your views and opinions about the world. Like maybe you have certain political views, and maybe you're advocating for everyone to agree with you. And now you're clinging to that, and you're trying to convince other people to agree with you. And now you might be in arguments, or angry, or hostile, or bitter, or harsh because people aren't agreeing with your perceptions, right? So if you cling to your perceptions, you're going to find yourself in arguments and being discontent. And then the same thing with your choices and decisions, that if you cling to these, it's going to cause discontentedness. Like if you have a decision that you're going to go travel somewhere, and you've made this decision maybe 3 to 6 months in advance, and now you show up to the airport and your flight's delayed by 3 hours, or it's canceled. because of the clinging to this decision, you'll be angry, you'll be frustrated. So you need to know not to cling to your choices and decisions, that impermanence is going to affect these things. And then the consciousness itself. This is the self-identity, that you don't cling to any kind of identity that the mind might be holding on to. So by eliminating the clinging to the 5 aggregates, you're realizing non-self, right? So you would like to be able to get to the point where you're not clinging to any of these things. And you would need to know what the 5 aggregates are in order to not cause harm to a living being. And then also so that you don't cling to it yourself, so you can eliminate personal existence view. And this is part of what's going to help you to be able to get into that first stage of enlightenment, to be able to eliminate personal existence view, is the 5 aggregates. So that's why you would need to know that on your journey to be able to actually get into the first stage of enlightenment. So any questions here that you guys would like to ask, just let me know. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So let's move to the next one. This is chapter 7. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, I think it was Pat's hand. All right, go ahead, Pat.
Thank you. Stream Enterer understands the 6 sense bases. Monks, there are 6 sense bases. What 6? The eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind. When, monks, a noble disciple understands as they really are the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of these 6 sense bases, then he is called a noble disciple who is a stream enterer, no longer bound to the netherworld, fixed in destiny with Nibbana as his destination. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So again, here's another one of those foundational teachings in order to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. It's not a foundational teaching to get on to the path to enlightenment. That's all those others that I typically talk about in the foundational courses. But this is a teaching that you would need to know the 6 sense bases in order to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. So the first step of learning this is just to know what the internal sense bases are: the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind itself. Then there's external sense bases. The eye sees physical forms, and the ear hears sounds. The nose smells odors. The tongue tastes flavors. The body comes in contact with physical objects. The mind recognizes mental objects. So it's the form, sounds, odors, flavors, the physical objects and mental objects, which are the external sense bases. And now when the eye has in its view this form, the mind then becomes aware of it. We refer to that as eye consciousness. And now these 3 things are what's called eye contact. And this is helpful for you to be able to decipher where your discontentedness is coming in. If you guys remember the story I gave you guys about the coffee, when I was getting rid of coffee and I was walking down the street and I got that whiff of coffee and I was into the coffee shop, I traced it back. I knew it was craving. I knew it was sensual desire, but I traced it back to the nose. And I knew that that was the problem, that I got that odor, that whiff of the coffee, and boom, it arose my craving and I went into the coffee shop. So there for a few months, I used to cross to the other side of the street in order to avoid that. And then once my mind let go of that craving, now I can sit in a coffee shop and smell it all day long, and I'm not going to pick up a cup of coffee and drink any coffee. So you're going to need to know the 6 sense bases, because you're going to need to delineate in some cases which doorway did I have contact through that arose this craving that produced this discontentedness. So that's why understanding the 6 sense bases is so important. And you're going to need to know what the Buddha is describing here: the cause, disappearance, gratification, danger, and the escape, in relationship to the 5 aggregates, but also in relationship to the 6 sense bases. The cause of what is going on here, the cause is the craving, desire, attachment. Whether it's the 5 aggregates or whether it's the 6 sense bases, it's that underlying craving, desire, attachment. That's the cause. The disappearance of these things, you need to know the universal truth of impermanence. The gratification is that the unenlightened mind has that fetter of sensual desire. It's looking for gratification. It's looking for those pleasant feelings. The danger in all of this is that the mind's going to keep experiencing discontentedness over and over and over again. And the escape is the Eightfold Path. So this is where the Buddha is talking about you need to know the cause, disappearance, gratification, danger, and escape of the 5 aggregates, of how to eliminate that clinging to the 5 aggregates. And you need to know how to eliminate this contact that you're experiencing that is arising, the craving, desire, attachment. You're going to have contact even as an enlightened being, but if you don't have craving in your mind won't be pulled in the direction of the object. So you need to know these 5 things in relationship to the 5 aggregates and the 6 sense bases. So let me know what questions you guys have here on chapter 7 about the 6 sense bases. And by the way, we're going to go into the 6 sense bases in a lot of detail when we get to volume 9. That whole book is devoted to the 6 sense bases and helping you to be able to understand that really well. Okay, so it looks like Mayu Lee has a question here. Teacher, would I also be able to purchase the poster of the Buddha as well? Yes, you can. If you guys would like to coordinate that, I'll either bring them with me to the US in March and we can spread them out from there because that'll make the shipping a lot cheaper for you guys. Or if you guys would like it prior to that, I can just ship it to you. It's just going to be a little bit more expensive because it's going across the ocean, where I can carry it on the plane at no cost because I already got a plane ticket. So you guys can talk and decide what it is you guys would like, and then just let me know whether you'd like it now or you'd like it in the future, and then I will make it happen for you guys. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. Okay, so now we've got chapter 8. Is there someone who would like to read this? I think Marcy, is that why you had your hand up to read?
Sure, Teacher David, I can read.
Okay.
2 kinds of stream entry. A confident stream entry. Monks. The eye is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The ear is impermanent.
Marcy, can I pause you just for 1 second?
Sure.
I think you're reading out of the book, right?
I am.
Yeah. I just actually changed this week because I noticed that plenty of students have been having challenges with this particular chapter. And I have seen that over time. So I adjusted the translation here just slightly. So if you wouldn't mind, could you read from the book here that I have displayed?
Oh, absolutely, Teacher David.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sure. Monks. The eye is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The ear is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The nose is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The tongue is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The body is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The mind is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. One who places confidence in these teachings and persists in them thus is called a confident practitioner, one who has entered in fixed course of righteousness, entered the plane of wholesome person, transcended the plane of the worldlings. He is incapable of doing any deed by reason of which he might be reborn in hell, in the animal realm, or in the realm of afflicted spirits. He is incapable of passing away without having realized the fruit of stream entry. A teachings practitioner, one for whom these teachings are understood, thus after being pondered to a sufficient degree with wisdom, is called a teachings practitioner, one who has entered the fixed course of righteousness, entered the plane of wholesome person, transcended the plane of worldlings. He is capable of doing any deed by reason of which he might be reborn in hell, in the animal realm, in the realm of afflicted spirits. He is incapable of passing away without having realized the fruit of stream entry.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So this is a chapter that has shown up in a couple of different books, and over the years, students have historically had challenges with this. And I looked at it really close last week and came up with a better way to represent it. And I even updated down here. So if anybody has this printed version, if you download this one, you'll see, and I've uploaded it online, and I've even uploaded it on Amazon as well, that I uploaded not only the word choices of the translation, but the description of it too, because people were having trouble with it as part of learning. So what the Buddha is teaching here is he's teaching that essentially on your way to the first stage of enlightenment, there's kind of like 2 qualities that you need to be able to develop. And depending on how you're starting out, if you start out with confidence or you start out with keen interest in studying the teachings and looking at them in detail, with both of these qualities, you're going to make your way to the first stage of enlightenment. And now that you're in that first stage of enlightenment, now you'll move on from there. So if somebody has confidence, meaning they have confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, in the community, then what the Buddha is saying is you're going to make your way to the first stage of enlightenment in this life. Or if you have an interest to study the teachings in detail and you examine them and study them, he's saying this type of person is going to make their way to the first stage of enlightenment in this life. So at least at a minimum to the first stage of enlightenment. So the way it was reading before, people were getting confused because they thought it was like two different ways to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. But instead, the Buddha is just saying, if you're starting out on this path or at any point along the path, if you develop the ability to have this confidence and this keen interest in studying the teachings in detail, you're going to find your way to the first stage of enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. And if you haven't already read this update, you might decide to do that if you'd like to study this one in more detail. But I can also answer any questions that you guys might have. Okay, not seeing any questions anywhere. And let's go to chapter 9. Someone like to read this one? Okay, Keely, go ahead, ma'am. You get a short one now since you had the long one before.
Okay, thank you. Fruits of stream entry. One who knows and sees these teachings as described in two kinds of stream entering. This is called a stream enterer, no longer bound to the nether world, fixed in destiny, with enlightenment as his destination. Sariputta, this noble eightfold path is the stream that is right will, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So here, the Buddha is once again just reiterating that it's the Eightfold Path that's going to help you to get to the first stage of enlightenment. That's a foundational teaching that you're going to need to get any kind of progress on the path to enlightenment. And these are things that you've heard from me over and over when you were learning all the foundational teachings, but it's really nice to see it in the words of the Buddha so that you can have confidence that, yes, I learned the actual teachings of the Buddha, even though you might not have seen his words back in those foundational classes on this particular topic, but now you can see them. And it's like, yeah. So there was some method to what David was teaching here, and he's laid out these courses in a way that is leading me to a particular result. So here the Buddha is basically helping you to be able to see that there's going to need to be this confidence and this keen interest in studying the teachings in detail. And the main teaching that you're starting off with is the Eightfold Path. And that's what's going to lead to you getting to that first stage of enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this one. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So now we've got chapter 10. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Samantha.
The stream enterer fulfills virtuous behavior, but cultivates concentration and wisdom only to a moderate extent. Monks, every half month, more than 150 training guidelines come up for recitation. Clansmen who aspire for their own good train in these. These are all comprised within these three trainings. What three? The training in the higher virtuous behavior or moral conduct, the training in the higher mind, mental discipline, and the training in the higher wisdom. These are the three trainings in which all this is comprised. Here, monks, a monk fulfills virtuous behavior, but cultivates concentration and wisdom only to a moderate extent. He falls into wrongdoing in regard to the lesser and minor training guidelines and rehabilitates himself. For what reason? Because I have not said that he is incapable of this, but in regard to those training guidelines that are fundamental to the spiritual life, in practicing with the spiritual life, his behavior is constant and steadfast. Having undertaken those training guidelines, he trains in them. With the complete destruction of 3 fetters, he is a stream enterer, no longer subject to rebirth in the lower world, fixed in destiny, with enlightenment as his destination.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So again, this is really helpful to be able to see in the words of the Buddha what he's teaching you here, because I've been teaching you these things all along, but now you can see it in his words. So what he's talking about here is a stream enterer has developed fully the virtuous behavior from the Eightfold Path, the right speech, right action, and right livelihood. They're steadfast on that. But in terms of the concentration that you're experiencing in that first stage of enlightenment, it's only to a moderate extent. And the same thing about wisdom. There's still more to cultivate. While you'll have all the teachings you need at the first stage of enlightenment, you haven't fully cultivated the wisdom of them at that point. And you haven't fully cultivated the mind with concentration at that point. So this first paragraph, the Buddha is saying, okay, every half of month that there's 150 training guidelines that he guides his students in reciting. This is where I talk about in classes. I say every 2 weeks, the Buddha came together and had his students chant his teachings every 2 weeks. And here, this is where you can see this. And what they were chanting partially is the Eightfold Path. This is the way to refer to the Eightfold Path at a high level. The virtuous behavior, the higher mind, and the wisdom. That's the 3 sections of the Eightfold Path. That's what an individual would need to be able to understand and know in order to make their way closer and closer to that first stage of enlightenment. And the Buddha is saying, okay, this individual fulfills virtuous behavior, meaning they're practicing the moral conduct from the Eightfold Path. They're practicing that level of moral conduct very well, but they only cultivate concentration and wisdom to a moderate extent. And then in that first stage of enlightenment, an individual is going to have missteps. They're going to have wrongdoing of some of the minor training guidelines, right? They're practicing the moral conduct of right speech, right action, right livelihood, but there's some conduct even deeper than that, right? Let's give an example of that. With right speech, there's refraining from lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. Those are the 4 aspects of right speech that a person who's in the first stage of enlightenment will be practicing. But a deeper teaching is the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. Speaking at the proper time, what you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. A person who's in the first stage of enlightenment, they still have ill will in their mind. So they're not going to be speaking with a mind of loving kindness in all situations. So this is where you might find yourself in certain relationships. You're able to practice that way, but in other ones you can't because you have so much craving perhaps, or a certain amount of craving there. So what the Buddha is saying is that a person who's in the first stage of enlightenment, they're going to have missteps with some of the minor training guidelines, but they're going to notice that and they're going to be able to correct it. That's what he's saying when they rehabilitate himself, because you'll have enough wisdom to realize, oh, I missed the mind with loving kindness. I didn't do that. Or, I wasn't speaking beneficially. Or, I wasn't speaking at the proper time, right? Maybe you got true and you got gentle because that's at the top level of right speech, but you didn't get those other aspects. Those are the lesser minor training guidelines, but you notice it and then you correct yourself and you improve from that point forward. And the Buddha is saying that this person is capable of doing that because they're steadfast in practicing the Eightfold Path. Their behavior is constant and steadfast. But in some of the lesser aspects of the path, the ones that are more detailed and more fine-tuning, that a person in the first stage of enlightenment isn't going to be practicing those, right? So that's what he's basically talking about here. And then here, I've shared with you guys all along that a person who's in the first stage of enlightenment will have eliminated the first 3 fetters of personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior, and observances. And you can see it here in the words of the Buddha that he's actually saying that. Okay, so let me know if you guys have any questions on this one. So you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So what I'll do then is just end by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha. Thank you to those of you guys that read. Thank you for the questions that you guys are asking. Thank you guys for just participating and just showing up and choosing that you're interested in learning and practicing these teachings, because now what you're going to see is you're going to get into some really detailed teachings, because now you're getting closer and closer to kind of midway in the book series, and it's going to get really detailed. And as I mentioned, you're going to really need to sink your teeth into some of these teachings. So if you aren't already, you might be interested in starting to read the books. Read the words of the Buddha, read the words that I'm sharing with you, and you might even decide to read it more than once rather than just read it once. If you have the time in your day, in your week, you might decide to read these chapters more than once, reading the words of the Buddha and reading the words that I'm sharing as well. So then maybe you come to class having already read, and you'll have interest to be able to dive into it deeper, and you'll have certain questions that are different than if you hadn't read. But also, if you read after class and you have questions, you can always reach out to me through our Facebook group. You can send me private messages, or you can schedule personal guidance as well. So thank you all for joining. Next week, we're going to be in chapters 11 through 20. We're going to be studying those and exploring those. Tomorrow in the group learning program, in volume 1, we're going to be in chapter 3. This is where I'm going to be teaching about enlightenment. What is enlightenment? It goes together really well with where we're at in this program, because we're going to be talking about the 4 stages of enlightenment and some other teachings there as well. So you're always welcome to join for that. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be in the 4th part of our 4-part series on loving kindness meditation. So that is where I'm going to guide you in loving kindness meditation, and then open up to any and all questions that you guys might have. So thank you all for joining, and perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee-ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.